What is up, Tube users, and welcome back to another episode of Overwatch 2 Heroes, an in-depth guide. Today, we are talking about one of the most interesting DPS heroes in the game, in my opinion, Symmetra. Without further ado, let's get right into talking about her primary fire for Photon Projector. Symmetra's primary fire is a beam weapon that has 3 stages of damage. At level 1, it deals 60 damage per second. At level 2, it deals 120 damage per second. And finally, at stage 3, it deals a deadly 180 damage per second. To advance to each stage for this weapon, you must be dealing damage to an enemy or an enemy object like shields, turrets, mines, etc. for 1 second. If the beam isn't hitting anything, it will decay stages after 2 seconds from level 3 to level 2 and 1.5 seconds from level 2 back to level 1. Another important thing to note is Symmetra's health pool is consisted of 100 normal health and 125 shield health. And while using her primary fire on an enemy barrier or an enemy target that has shields, she will regenerate her shield health at a rate of 30 shields per second. This primary fire is fairly close range, capping out at 12 meters, but her alternate fire has a much longer range. Symmetra's alternate fire for a Photon Projector is a projectile weapon that deals 50 damage on direct hit and 50 splash damage to enemies within a 2 meter radius. This projectile is quite large at a 0.5 meter radius. Although this may not be ideal for hitting targets around cover, the projectile will only explode if the center part of the projectile hits something, making it easier to deal with enemies around cover. The charge time for this weapon to deal its maximum damage is 1 second, and the charge can be held for an additional second before automatically firing. If it's held at its maximum charge, it will consume 10 ammo. One of the more interesting things to note is the damage for this weapon is scaled off of charge time, not ammo consumption. Now, let's move on to Symmetra's first ability. Symmetra's first ability is Sentry Turret. These turrets deal beam damage and can have a maximum of 3 turrets placed at any given time. If a turret deals damage to an enemy, they will take 25 damage per second, are slowed by 15%, and are revealed for 1 second. Revealed targets allow allies to see the enemies through walls. When placing the turrets, they act as a projectile, moving 20 meters per second and stopping and activating when hitting a wall. These turrets can be placed on pretty much any wall or ceiling, including the payload in hybrid and escort maps. The cooldown for these turrets is 10 seconds per turret. So in order to replace all 3 turrets, you have to wait a total of 30 seconds. If there are already 3 turrets placed on the map somewhere, and you place another, it will replace the first turret that was placed. It's also worth noting that while moving through the air, the turret cannot attack, but can be destroyed by enemies, and can pass through enemy barriers. Now, let's talk about Symmetra's second ability. Symmetra's next ability is Teleporter. This ability places 2 teleporter pads, one at Symmetra's location and one wherever Symmetra confirms the location up to 30 meters away. Allies and some allied abilities are able to pass through these teleporters. In order for Symmetra and allies to use the teleporter, they must use the interact key to activate it, unless they are a separate entity from the player. Those will automatically teleport. The teleport has an HP pool of 50 normal health and 150 shield health. If the teleporter avoids taking damage for 3 seconds, it will start to regenerate its shield health at a rate of 30 shields per second. The teleporter can be destroyed by pressing the ability again, even while Symmetra is dead. While it's typical for most DPS heroes to have an offensive ultimate ability, Symmetra's does the opposite and goes entirely defensive. Symmetra's ultimate ability is Photon Barrier, which is a massive shield that lasts for 12 seconds. The shield has an astounding length and height at 484 meters long and 50 meters tall, which cuts through the entirety of most maps in the game. The barrier's health pool is one of the largest in the game at 4,000 HP. This ability has a max cast range of 25 meters and must be confirmed to use, meaning you have to press the ultimate and then press the confirmation button to confirm its location. Now that we've gone over all of Symmetra's abilities, let's dive into heroes that counter and are countered by Symmetra. Symmetra is a hero who plays well against other heroes who rely on speed or defensive abilities to get them out of situations, thanks to her high damage beam primary fire. As for tanks she plays well against, I've said in a past video that she does well against D.Va, but today I'm going to go with Sigma. With Sigma's barrier and shield health pool allowing Symmetra to regenerate her shield health, plus her beam rifle being able to cut through Sigma's kinetic grasp defensive, this matchup works well in Symmetra's favor. Another hero Sim plays well against is Genji. Again, with her beam primary fire being able to cut through his deflect and her turret slowing Genji by 15%, this is a solid matchup for Sim. Finally, a support hero that Symmetra plays well against is Brigitte. Because of her barrier allowing Sim to regenerate her shield health and having to be in close range to Sim to deal damage, this matchup can be tough for Brigitte. Now, let's look at the other side of things and see which heroes counter Symmetra. Symmetra suffers from a lack of movement abilities and her primary fire taking 2 seconds to deal its maximum damage at close range, which can be a detriment to her. One tank hero that can capitalize on this is Roadhog. With his HP pool being large and all normal health, Sim can't effectively regain shield health from him, plus his chain hook and high damage close range could be a nightmare for Symmetra to deal with. Another hero who does well against Symmetra is Reaper. With his deadly close fire and his passive to regain health each time he does damage, this is another matchup that does not bode well for Symmetra. Finally, a support hero that does well versus an enemy Sim is Illari. With her deadly charge rifle being able to deal significant damage from range, and her outburst ability allowing her to escape Sim from close range, this is not a good matchup for Symmetra. Now let's move into some tips and tricks for Symmetra. My first tip, and something you'll see a lot from Symmetra players, is comboing your teleporter with your sentry turrets. After you place your teleporter, you can place your sentry turrets in the teleporter and they will be teleported to your other teleport pad and be shielded by your teleporter. So it's a good way to deal high damage off of your teleporter. Your teleporter is also a really good utility to combo with other ultimates and different abilities from your allies. A couple that I like to combo with is trying to use D.Va's self-destruct mech through a teleporter, or like Junkrat's Riptire through a teleporter, or especially if you combo Orisa's ultimate Terra Surge with teleporting into enemies can be really fun to do. And typically with the low health pool of your turrets, you want to place them on flanking routes to allow you to see when enemies are flanking. Usually they'll be able to pick off the turrets pretty quickly, but getting that 1 second of reveal time against enemies can be really helpful to know when an enemy is flanking. One thing you'll see a lot in pro Overwatch play, especially on control maps, is you'll see people switching to Sim at the start of a map to use their teleporter to allow allies to get closer, and then switching back to whatever hero they're going to play. So typically it's just a good way for your allies to get to the point faster, and then switching back to a hero that they want to play other than Sim. Another tip I have when playing against an enemy D.Va is to use your ultimate photon barrier against D.Va's ultimate self-destruct. Because it acts as a shield, you can use it to prevent any damage from the self-destruct. And typically if you're playing like on a control map or even playing hybrid or escort, you want to use it to cut the point in half. That allows you to weave in and out of damage if enemies are going back and forth between the shield. Just because it has so much health, nobody's going to try and break it down in time. Although one thing to note is that with your ultimate ability, it can be EMP'd by Sombra's ultimate. And one final thing to note about Symmetra's ultimate ability is that it does have a cast time, so the shield won't come out right away, so you have to be aware of that. As for using her primary fire, you want to be using it on basically any enemy barriers or walls that they have, especially like a May wall or anything like that, because those can be used to charge up your beam rifle and allow you to get to level 3 beam. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. Comment any other tips and tricks you have for Symmetra. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
That rhythm.